We'll bring everything together by importing both the model and the set into the same scene. So I'll bring in the destroyed town that consists of 3-point lighting, and I'm going to set a few things up. Well, one thing really. I'm going to merge the two ground objects that we see here, the grassy area and pathway objects, into an object called ground. I'll freeze the modeling stack because I don't really need to deal with it. Actually, in the merge meshes, I'll just set the tolerance really low and freeze it. I'll rename the object to ground, and I'll drag it into the environment model cleaned, and I'll hide it. So now what I can do is scale everything down. Maybe what I'll even do is merge together the grassy area and pathway objects. I'll set their tolerance really low and make sure I merge all the materials over and delete the original. So we'll call this one the Viz ground. I'll drop it into the environment model. And actually, I don't really need the ground if I've merged the two of them, so I'll delete that. So this is going to be my collision object for the leaves. I'll import the tree now, my importing model, and I'll import the tree simulation model. And this brings up a little bit of a dilemma here. We've got a tiny little tree on a pedestal. Don't really need that pedestal anymore. That's the ground pedestal. It's going to actually throw off a bit of a conflict with the compounds because they now no longer can find an object in the scene by the name of ground. But that's okay. We'll soon point it to the ground here. And what I'm going to do is select all of the models and scale them down by creating a transform group and scaling the transform group to the size of the tree. Now the reason is because a lot of the values inside of ice are set with the global scale of objects in mind. And if you start scaling your objects up and down, you can throw off a lot of calculations. So I always recommend scaling your sets around your iced scenes, if possible. Okay, so I think that's a pretty decent size there. If I open up the Explorer and make sure I turn on nulls, you can see I've got my leaf killer. If I find it and maybe set the time limit to 500 frames, we can see how everything works. If I press play, I get my leaves blowing in the wind. And of course, as I move my leaf killer over top of the leaves, they fall from the branches and collect on the ground below. Now the problem here is that they're actually going to go right through the ground because they don't have a collision object by the name of Viz ground yet. So if we actually look, they should be drifting right through, and they're not. So let's just double check and see what's going on in the point cloud. It may be that the leaves haven't reached this point yet. It's definitely not resolving, and you can see that the name thisModel.ground just cannot be found. So I'll actually point it towards the items I find in the environment model, namely the visibility ground. There we go. So the compound now resolves, and if I just put this into something like hidden line mode or even wireframe, I'll be able to see in a little faster time how this all sort of shakes down. So we have our leaf blowing in the wind. I'll move a few leaves off of their branches into the second state at which they fall down, and eventually they hit the ground and they stick in their last known state. Alright, so there's a few of them that got away. Again, the reason that you see this happening here is because a lot of the particles simply don't deal with two-dimensional surfaces really well. So I think what I'll end up having to do is extrude this surface, make it an actual thick surface. So I'm going to render off a sequence of the trees in this environment to see how the whole effect looks. So here we go. In the end, a simulated tree model exported on its own and imported back into a set, and it works seamlessly. So some very cool applications for ice.